Hello, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on the part of the world that you're in. My name is Nate Miller. I am the founder and CEO of Proving Ground, and I am joined by my colleague Nicole Mader, who is our director of product. And together, we're going to be presenting some of the updates that we're excited to share with you regarding our tracer product, which I'll be covering a little bit in just a second here in more detail about what tracer is, what it does, the different workflows that are available with it. But we are on the verge of a release of a new version of tracer. So the intent of this webinar is to give you all a bit of a preview of some of the new features that we are planning to roll out in the next month. That will be available as a product upgrade. I do want to make a note that this session is being recorded, and the recording will be available after the webinar is finished processing. I typically try to get the recording out to participants and folks that have signed up within 24 hours of a webinar. So expect a follow-up email with that recording, this recording available. Additionally, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to use our question and answer feature in this webinar and post a question as we go. And we'll periodically take a break and cover some of the questions. So there'll likely be a Q&A portion after the presentation and then shortly after the demo that we'll be giving. And if you have any comments, feel free to use the chat. And we'll be kind of looking at comments coming in there as well as we proceed. So what is this concept of tracer, and kind of what is our kind of motivation behind building up this tool kit? Over the last couple of years, we have really seen a need within the industry among architects, engineers, contractors, and owners for easy and simple data-driven reporting processes. And we know that there are common tools available that are quite popular in the space of data analysis and reporting. Tools like Power BI have a very large user base and surface area for leveraging data and composing reports. And so we wanted to really think about how we could start to bring data from architecture, engineering, construction, and operations into this environment. In particular, the use of three-dimensional information that is essential to understanding space and assets within the building information modeling context. So with that motivation in mind, one of the things that has kind of jumped out to us as a major need throughout all of this is the ability for professionals in the construction industry to tell stories with their data and use data as a way of delivering insight. And it's I think many of you on this call should be no stranger to this idea that every day we're dealing and grappling with multitudes of data sources, all of which have different kinds of complexities, different points of access. And there are also varying needs among our teams for the kinds of data that we need to do our job. And it kind of, as we kind of think about the uses of data and the uses of being able to present and understand and consume data, these different groups that might be on our team in our business or among our collaborators might require different things. And you may have, experts and wizards in the data front that are looking at and composing these reports. You might have general staff that are, just trying to understand the performance drivers so they can make their project or their building perform better. Managers looking for insight into the relationship between the project that they're working on and the kind of performance characteristics of a project, and then executives who are making important business decisions. So these all have these all kind of relate to the same kind of pool of data that is, oftentimes siloed and decentralized, but they need to all come together. And I think one of the kind of current state of things at the moment is a lot of this data is so decentralized that it's really hard to track, right? You have, oftentimes we ask our clients and customers, like, where do you keep your data? And this is a common response. Oh, it's kind of in a spreadsheet somewhere. And that's kind of the challenge, isn't it? This idea that we need to turn this variety and of data sources into something that is insightful and can tell a story. And when we look at the kind of industry specificity of the types of data that we're dealing with, we're not only dealing with tabular information and spreadsheets, we're also dealing with three-dimensional spatial relationships. And we wanted to, with Tracer, provide a mechanism for allowing professionals to compose with that information. So what you're seeing on screen here is a bit of a preview of a demo that you'll be seeing shortly after the presentation, wherein a user should be able to access their model data alongside other possible sources of information that are relevant to the decisions that you need to make. And using interfaces and user experiences available in places like Power BI, you should be able to drag and drop this information and rapidly compose reports that are kind of meaningful to the story that you want to tell. And this kind of leads into, I guess, what you could call development guideposts for what we kind of are prioritizing with Tracer as a product. And so as I talk through some of the features and capabilities of the future version of Tracer, this is kind of what we've had in the back of our minds at Proving Ground. We think that there is a massive opportunity to leverage common tools to deliver data. I mentioned before that tools like Microsoft Power BI have a very large surface area of users globally. And so there's a high amount of familiarity. A lot of firms and companies have access to this platform as part of their Office 365 suite. So we thought, oh, well, if we can start to build on top of this data environment that professionals already have access to, that might allow us to cover the ability to deliver the capability to a wider group of folks. We also think of this as more than just a viewer. It is certainly able to view three-dimensional models. You could spin it around, use common navigation conventions when it comes to 3D models. But as you'll start to see as we go through the examples and updates, is that it is a 3D analytical interface. Wherein you're able to attach data to objects, you can filter, you can start to create different visual experiences with the viewer and the kind of the 3D visual. So there's that kind of dimension to this. We want it to be more than just something that you're able to spin around. It has to be kind of embedded into the analytical story that you're attempting to convey. We are, I guess you could call it, I couldn't quite think of the right word for this, but I feel like native viewing is the best maybe approach insofar as our visual is not dependent on kind of like a third-party cloud service or anything like that. We're not pushing the kind of BIM 360 viewer to Power BI or anything like that. We've basically built a ground-up viewer for certain information that can be harvested and extracted from models. So when you embed the viewer into your report, it's in your report and you can publish it and share it however you need to without having to have subscriptions to other services. And then finally, there is a no-code user experience in mind here. We want individuals to be able to compose three-dimensional interactive reports with their data without having to write a single line of code to do it. And as you'll see, we'll be able to kind of go through this process of dragging and dropping data onto into like the Power BI Composer report interface and publish to the web without having to wrangle a single line of HTML or SQL to get there, depending on your task, of course. So this is kind of what's motivating I guess, the background of the development and where we're kind of going with this toolkit. And this kind of leads naturally into where the tool is going with version 3. So we've had several versions of Tracer in the past, and we will be now soon to be releasing a third version of Tracer, or I guess a third version of the visual. We're kind of going through a bit of a version reconciliation process across all of our product lines. So we're calling it Tracer version 3 at the moment, and that'll apply to both our Revit solution and our IFC solution. The visual is compatible with both environments. And we've heard a lot of feedback from our customers, a lot of really positive feedback, a lot of ways that we can improve the product. And what we've tried to do is really pay close attention to what we think is going to be the things that are going to elevate the project, this product to the next level. So just as a quick kind of bit of context here, Tracer is a toolkit. It's a Power BI visual, but it's also a set of data harvesters. And these data harvesters allow users to take data from their models. It might be a proprietary format like Revit, or it might be an open format like IFC. And you can translate your model information to an open relational database that is able to be connected into your business intelligence world. So Power BI can make a direct connection to these databases after you've harvested them out. So so you have this concept of harvesting, and then beyond that, you have this ability to then visualize that data and perform some degree of analysis. One of the number one things we've heard from our customers and our clients regarding the visual is visual performance. So we know that architects and engineers and owners are dealing with rather sizable, complex models. And we're pushing those models into Power BI, which out of the box isn't designed to handle 3D. And if you use our visual today, the version 2, you can get to a high degree of complexity, but it will really take a tax on the visual performance, things like frame rate and the smoothness of navigation. With version 3, we have basically overhauled our entire 3D engine such that you can, from the ground up, such that the visual performance is much improved. So what you're seeing on top is version 2, navigating around a mechanical model. It's got a lot of objects. It's you can kind of see as you kind of go through that in the top view, it was kind of choppy, frame rate was dropping. But since we've overhauled the visual, the bottom view, which is version 3, shows a much smoother navigation process. It can basically turn a complex model on a dime, which is something we're really, really excited about. And we've been chucking some rather large models at this thing to see how things go. And we'll be kind of doing a live demo of this in a bit. But the handling of large, complex models was really the kind of, I guess, core focus of everything, is how can we communicate more information, larger models, and more complex geometry. One of our, you could call it our biggest adversaries in this context are models like plumbing models. These models often have highly detailed fixture content, sinks, toilets, pipes, pipe connections. And we've seen our visual basically in past versions be brought to its knees on the kinds of high poly, highly detailed models that are available here. And what you're seeing on screen is a plumbing model that Tracer would have struggled to render in past versions, now rendering with ease because of our underlying overhaul of the three-dimensional context. Again, emphasis on smooth navigation, that experience has been really important here. And I think for models like this arena, this kind of performance enhancement is very, very apparent. Here you have a 10,000 seat stadium arena being rendered in the Power BI context. So you can see each of the individual seats. You can see the kind of structural elements, the seating bowl geometry, and things of that nature, handling very, very well in the context of Tracer version 3. So that kind of fundamental revisiting of how can we make visualization faster, better, and have a better experience is really at the, I guess, central core of version 3. And then building from that, we've been looking at ways with which we can give builders and designers the ability to really customize the experience beyond smooth navigation. We want there to be this ability to really give more control over how you convey three-dimensional geometry in Power BI. So that leads us to visual format settings. So here's that mechanical model I was showing before. We still have the different shading modes available, things like soft shading, which handles, again, as part of the performance improvements we've made, handles exceptionally well on complex model settings. We can go in and we can also turn off edges entirely in this case. So if you don't want to see like edges in your geometry, you want kind of more of a smooth shading, that's now possible. We can also go to a pure wireframe mode. So if you're really fond of CAD-like interfaces, you can start to create styles of visuals that have that that kind of look and feel. So here you can see X-ray mode with a black background, which harkens back to like a three-dimensional AutoCAD model. But these are all to kind of, again, tell the story and kind of really tap into the user preference of how you want to convey your information. And we're continuing to kind of expand that kind of format setting. We've also introduced in Visual version 3 this ability to control what we refer to as contextual geometry. So if you have two models that need to be overlaid on top of each other, can you push one to the background and have it be something that is kind of almost an overlay on an active model? So what you're seeing here are two models operating in parallel, both overlaid on top of each other. One is an architectural model showing walls, doors, windows, conventional architectural elements that you'd want to see. And then you also have a structural model overlaid on top of that. And what we're able to do with the contextual geometry input is flag different elements in the element record as being contextual, meaning that, hey, take these elements, this grouping of architectural elements, and push it to the background. So it's there as an X-ray or as a ghosted representation. And then the elements that are active and really the focus of the report can come forward as being the kind of primary point of emphasis for the report. So now allows us to do some pretty clever things with being able to segment a model, understand focus points of a model. If you're just trying to show off your, as you'll see later, like your mechanical system, but you want to have spaces as an X-ray view behind as an underlay, that's now possible with the three-dimensional visual. In addition to that, we've expanded this ability to have multiple views. In past versions of Tracer, it was one of our introductions, this idea of multi-viewing. So you can segment different objects to a multitude of viewports. And one of the things that you could do with version 2 is have your visuals in sync with each other. So you can as you rotate in one view, it's going to rotate the parallel view. What we've introduced in version 3 is this ability to have independent navigation of the different viewports. So here you have two models that are segmented out into their own individual viewport. One's a spatial model, architectural model, and the other one's a structural model, same models as before, now kind of parsed in parallel with each other. And there are now controls allowing you to both link the viewports together, but also unlink them so you can have individual navigation. So spin around the structural model separately from the architectural model. Another area that we've been very much focused on is this ability to really format the data display, so the color overrides of a visual. In past versions, we've had the base ability to categorize objects and color code them based on those categories. We also had like a gradient interface that allows you to set a top range and a bottom range. In this version, we have integrated our visual with Power BI's conditional formatting rules. So what this allows you to do is do some pretty fun things with creating custom heat maps. You can, for example, find objects that contain a certain value and flag them as a color. So here you can see the spaces in red exceed a certain area threshold, for example. But this kind of flexibility is now giving users, will give the users the ability to really, tailor their, I guess, conditional formatting experience such that you now have more possibilities for how you want to tell, the story with your metrics, the ability to do, different gradients, establish different thresholds, flag different objects based on different values is all now kind of going to be baked into Tracer version 3. So these are the kind of core features we're really excited for our users to get a handle on and get an understanding of and work with here. But we've also introduced a number of other improvements that are going to be baked into the product. One thing that you can expect here in the coming month is that there will be updated documentation, new tutorials, new ways of getting onboarded with the product to really help users understand how they can use the tools. One thing that we've been hearing a lot about is that we've had a non-trivial number of users across the globe pick up Tracer. We're a very small US-based company. And we often hear like, hey, this special character that we use in French or in Spanish isn't showing up correctly in Power BI. We have improved our exporting harvesting process to ensure that non-English characters or special characters are appearing correctly when they make their way over into Power BI. So that's something to look forward to. We've also improved support for measures. Measures are kind of a form of data input that weren't fully supported in past versions, specifically when it came to categorizing objects and color coding objects. What you can expect in the new version is that measures will be supported. We've also expanded model export options for the exporter process. And finally, while it's not the focus of this presentation, there are going to be some 2D visual updates that are going to be comparable to what you just saw in 3D. So we have a 2D visual that renders vector graphics. You can expect to see some of the contextual geometry inputs as well as the support for conditional formatting to be implemented in the 2D visual as well. So before I get into the next step here, it looks like there are a few questions in the Q&A box. Will we see the same V3 rendering upgrades in the semantic viewer that supports Rhino geometry? The answer to that is absolutely. In fact, what we are planning for semantic will trail behind Tracer just a little bit because there's some planned upgrades that we want to have to the semantic interface in Rhino itself. But what you can expect to see as a general preview here are all the same features that you just saw with this particular visual. You'll be able to attach a Rhino model. And what we're also aiming to do is make Tracer, the visual that you just saw, compatible with Rhino. So one of the things that we're going to be introducing with semantic is this ability to export object records to SQLite relational databases, which will, I think, yield a lot of very interesting workflows for how you mash up Rhino models with Revit models and IFC models. So that's something that we have planned. So that's coming soon in a future webinar, I guess. The second question, if we filter one or two objects by a parameter, will the viewer zoom to fit only the queried object? I think I understand what you're asking there. I think with filtering, extraneous geometry is oftentimes taken out of the model. So doing a zoom extents should get you there. If you feel, but if you're doing object highlighting, zoom extents is still recognizing other objects in the scene. So there's some trickiness to that. But that's something that we can certainly take up as a development group and discuss. Have there been updates related to picking which parameters to export? At this point, no. Our model harvesting approach is grabbing everything. So if you export an object out of Tracer, say you export all of your furniture families, it's going to export all the parameters for that too. We're primarily because we want complete object records of the objects that we export. From a UI perspective, that could introduce in my view, quite a bit of complexity if we all of a sudden start querying specific parameter lists, which on very large models can be, quite daunting of a user interface to filter. So for now, you're able to kind of get down to the at a categorical level, a view level. And I think we're also going to introduce a new kind of type filter as well that will let you hone which ones you're exporting. Alice has asked, does the update with the latest Power BI put, let's see, does the update help with the out of memory issues that is on the BI side of things? I would hope so. One thing that we're doing with the visual, I don't know if it will relate to, there's an issue right now with the latest versions of Power BI where the latest versions are hitting out of memory issues when handling large data sets. We have seen this issue crop up just in the general sense. But what we found with our visual in particular is that the handling of large quantities of data is also helped with memory management quite a bit on our visual side. That's to say nothing of Power BI's core memory issues, but hopefully it does help, because we do know that handling 3D geometry is a rather memory intensive task, and also something that can really put Power BI's performance on notice, I guess you could say. I also see some things in the chat here. Let me just check out some of these. Can we sign up for a beta of V3? Not at the moment. We're not offering a beta, but there will be a new fresh trial opportunity for version 3. So if you're interested in trying things out, seeing how things handle before you upgrade, you're more than welcome to do that. Is there support for geometry and attributes for multidiscipline 3D plant design applications, such as hexagons in Intergraph Smart 3D? We're not, so those are very specific proprietary applications. We currently support, the one proprietary application that we support is Revit model exports. And then we're also supporting IFC exports. So if those applications can export to IFC, that's probably going to be your best pathway to getting geometry and attributes out of the applications that have been mentioned in the chat there. So moving on to just the next section before we get into a demo, I did want to talk about pricing and upgrades. So version 3 represents a significant step forward in our 3D application visualization. So this is an upgrade opportunity. We are offering discounts to current customers that have been using version 1 and version 2 of Tracer. And there are, as well as both on the Revit side and the IFC side. So what you can expect is that we will continue to offer a perpetual license purchase on from the website directly. And then if you have, once it's released, there will be a license upgrade option for existing users to up their current license to the new version. And that applies to the Revit version. and it also is going to apply to the IFC version. So there will be upgrade opportunities for everyone when it comes to having a supported tracer in the past and moving up to the new version. We also do have enterprise subscriptions. If you're an enterprise customer, meaning that you've signed a contract with us to have continuous updates to all of our applications, and you're supporting the implementation of these tools at a company-wide agreement, the upgrade is automatically included in your enterprise subscription. And as I mentioned, this theme does relate very closely to semantic and the semantic Rhino, which is the 3D Rhino visual, and the Revit visual are all very interrelated. We do have a planned update in this coming, towards the end of this coming quarter for releasing a version of semantic with all of these same visual enhancements. And so you can expect to see a webinar on that subject very, very soon. If you're interested in the current product offering, you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. This is how you can get to the Proving Ground site. I wanted to transition to a demo that Nicole will be going through. So what Nicole will be doing is going through a couple of examples of the new Tracer 3D visual in action, both kind of populating a report and some examples of the visual performing in the browser, which I think will be really exciting. So Nicole, take it away.
Great. So here we have the Power BI desktop user interface. For some of you, you'll be very familiar with this. For others, it might be brand new. So just very quickly, I'll walk through what some of your options are related to the Tracer visual. Here is a Tracer visual window or view. And when you're selected on this view, you can edit the contents and what it displays in this visualizations panel. The fields panel is essentially all of your data. These are individual columns from the data in the DB file that are being read. And you can drag and drop. So I'm going to select element mesh into the geometry field. And that will bring up the geometry of your database into the viewer. So it's really, really simple. In order to get tooltips, I'll drop that into there as well. And then to get some coloring and categorization into the model, we'll use name. This will give every space, every room in this model, these volumes that are being shown are rooms, a different color based on its name. I'll also show you how easy it is to go in and change those colors. So if we wanted to, we could reassign the colors of different rooms in the model using the visual editing capabilities. This is currently set to categorical, as Nate showed earlier. You could also use rules for conditional formatting or pull from the source model, in this case, the Revit model. So this is a really smooth experience compared to the previous version, and everything's rendering very cleanly. You can also select, as we showed earlier, and hover over to get tooltip information about the individual components that are being selected. So that's the very quick example of how you would build out one of these things. I'll switch over to another model just to show you the amount of complexity that the viewer can handle. So this is, again, that 10,000 seat arena example, and you can see it's still moving pretty smoothly. It might be chopping up a little bit going over Zoom, but it's pretty seamless. You also have the ability to adjust the views. In this case, you can select which categories are visible in the model. And I wanted to show you how quickly it can regenerate something like this structure. So you saw it took about 8 seconds for it to regenerate the whole model as we change the categories and which ones are visible. So from here, I'll switch over to the browser view. So what we have in the browser is essentially an exported view from the desktop viewer. This was a model that Nate showed earlier in the videos, and now we're seeing it on this browser view end. These are, again, different rooms in the model, and they're colored by category. And you can use these other view type panels to select and highlight different types of categories within the model. So selecting office over here highlights all of the offices in the model. The use cases for this could be really great for architects, for example, who are space planning, or architects sending this to a client to help them understand the relationships between spaces a little bit better. This might be more useful than a set of plans, for example, or a set of still drawings, because it's interactive and you can really highlight these different relationships. You can also see, as I'm clicking and selecting on these categories, it's updating the table down below. So all of these areas are being shown of different spaces and totaled. And depending on which category you select, that updates as well. So it's a pretty useful feature. We'll switch to another view. This one is from an IFC model, and this shows the complexity that the browser version is able to handle. So you can see I'm navigating around, it's very smooth. We can zoom in and tooltip over different elements to get information about what each of those are. And a use case for this might be an engineer collaborating with others, or in the field wanting to see the entire system that's been designed. And this is so lightweight and so easy that they could do this on a laptop on the site, or any other place where they would have access to the browser version. This third view is maybe most applicable to an owner and their use cases. So Nate's previously done a presentation on the digital twin concept that you might be familiar with. And this is really bringing together different sources of information about this small office building that an owner might care to track. So for example, you can track employees and the physical assets in the office that are assigned to each of them, as well as other attributes about the space around them. You could track maintenance of those physical assets and get a visual view of which assets need to be retired, which assets need maintenance, which assets are fine in their current state, and which assets belong to which employees. So that's a very quick overview. Nate, is there anything that you wanted to reinforce?
No, I think the main thing about everything that you've just showed that I do want to put a fine point on is that I think it's kind of amazing to see that a user with a someone that's composing a report, maybe with a nominal level of experience navigating 3D, putting together a report with Power BI, can get from a kind of a desktop report composer that is primarily built around no code experiences to the web browser and have it published through that system. I just think back to the, even just some years ago, what it would take for a firm to put together a report with three-dimensional integration, and the amount of development that may have even occurred to get there. And here, our aim is to just try to make that kind of seamless and able to be implemented by non-experts in the space of analytics and coding. So we're pretty excited about that. Let's see. I think I saw a few things coming in to the chat here. Is it possible to test the V3 version before upgrading? Yes, we'll have a trial version up for that, so even current users will be able to try it out before they choose to upgrade or not. And there was a question about ghosting visualization. So we do have a new kind of ghosting command. So if you wanted to, and we may not necessarily, maybe Nicole can do it live. If you go to, it won't be under context style. If you go to, there you go. If you change it to ghosted mode, you can have objects kind of appear ghosted, and then everything drops down to wireframe. So there are other components there that allow you to kind of control that user experience. I think there was a question, when you currently select an element in 2D, everything else just okay. So the question was actually related to the 2D visual. I would be interested in following up with you to kind of maybe get some clarification on what you mean by everything else disappears. When you select something in the 2D visual, other stuff should drop to the background and not disappear entirely. So maybe we can talk about that. Filters are another kind of matter entirely when it comes to the control and display of objects. Alice has asked, will this update impact existing visuals we have already developed and published? The answer to that is no. You can continue to use the previous visual however you need to. And if you've published it to users, the upgrade won't impact that. What you will find with the new version of Tracer is that when you bring it in, it will bring in a new visual widget. So if you're it won't, because of the nature of a lot of the changes we've made, it won't auto update your previous visuals that have been instantiated in the report with V2 and prior. It will bring in a new visual, and then you can kind of remap things as needed. We kind of weighed, okay, what's the best experience here for a user in terms of like just bringing it in, and that tended to and overwrite previous ones that tended to break a number of things. So we decided against that and said, like, okay, we want to make sure that the users are able to preserve their previous work as much as possible. Any VR integration? No, I would say that Power BI doesn't really lend itself to a VR type of environment unless you wanted to put on the goggles and have a Power BI report sitting in front of you. What visibility options will be made for the published browser visual? For example, can ghosting be available for the browser viewer? Well, there are, within the browser, there are editors. You can edit things in Power BI and have access to essentially the full spectrum of controls in the browser. For published versions, those types of decisions about ghosting and other things, those are visual format settings. And that's kind of really driven by the author. So the user of a published report wouldn't necessarily be able to toggle on some of the other kind of custom visual settings. It's sort of there is an aspect here of authorship and curation and the kind of experience you're wanting to share with others. Can semantic tracer customers book office hours of proving ground staff for support? Our enterprise customers kind of have that as an option when it comes to kind of more attentive support. At the moment, if you're someone that's bought it off the website, we try to be responsive to support requests that come through in a timely manner. Sometimes we miss things and requires a bump up in our email. But the kind of standard support is, we tend to answer questions as they come through in our standard operating hours of business. But our enterprise customers get a more, I would say, an expanded level of support, both with levels of consulting hours and as well as training opportunities and kind of more directed project team support. Can we show a report on model clashes? I think you might be able to get creative with that. I mean, we're not building a clash detection software, so we're not going to be able to say like, oh, here's 3 models, find where everything intersects. That would be cool, but it's a very different lift than kind of creating a kind of an analytical experience in Power BI. So we're not really doing geometric analysis, which is what would be required for like a clash detection type of model. Date of rollout. I am hoping, great question. I am hoping by the end of this month that we would have this visual and an update to the exporter available. So we are very, very close. Typically, when we do webinars like this, we like to be very close with the product. I would say the visual itself is in a spot where we're all very comfortable with where we're at and the stability of the product. We have a few finer points to put on a couple of other components, build the installer, set up do some recorded documentation, etc. So let's see here. How are we doing on time, Nicole? I guess it's 11:47.
It's 11:47.
Okay. So there was I guess we can keep going here with some questions. We kind of went through that really quickly. So hopefully it's a testament to the efficiency of what we're talking about. There was a question about if on the digital twin example that you showed, if you could jump over to that example.
Sure.
The question was, if you clicked on Pollyanna Rigby, the staff, would the desk light up? And it should be the case.
There we go. It just took a second.
There she is. So yeah, the idea is that this is interactive, and I think that the same is true if you selected the entire development team bar graph as well. If you clicked on that, that's going to highlight the desks related to that the location of that particular team and the relationship. So yeah, the idea is that the visual does interact with other report elements as you establish your relational model within Power BI. Good question. What is the process for upgrading for existing customers? So when you purchased, if you're an existing customer on Power BI and you've purchased Power BI, I might retake control here of the screen. 1 second, Nicole. I can guide everyone to this information. 1 second. Share my screen. Okay. And I want this one. Great. Okay. So when you purchase a product through the Proving Ground website, you do have a user account that's created. And with this user account, you have the ability to manage your licenses. You can access your past purchases, past downloads, all of that stuff is available here. If an upgrade is made available to you, you are able to log in, visit your purchase history, view upgrade opportunities, and go through the upgrade process. So it's something that's part of the basically license management system that we've implemented. We're trying to always improve this experience as well. It's using a platform called Easy Digital Downloads as the basis here. So there are some things we can do, some things we can't do, a lot of good out of the box features, but hopefully this provides a convenient way for managing that stuff, including all of your past licenses. If you need to move licenses from one device to another, all that stuff is available here as a user control. Question about, is there a limitation on geometry and how can it be validated? So there are a few things that we track in terms of geometry limitation and things like that. They're obviously the more complex the geometry and the more quantity of geometry that you have, that'll impact loading time more than anything else. The viewer responsiveness is something we're currently really proud of and have been impressed by in terms of how much it can handle at once. There are things related to like mesh size that require some, perhaps some special data load workarounds with, it's kind of more of a Power BI limitation than it is a limitation of what we're consuming. We have some workflows for that defined in our documentation. We are now paying special attention to frame rates when it comes to the experience of navigating a model. So if, for example, you're navigating a high poly model and the frame rate drops between a certain threshold, in order to kind of gain traction, things will kind of drop into a wireframe view to maintain smoothness of navigation. A lot of the models that we showed have never hit that frame rate. There were some Rhino models I was battle testing recently that had some high poly geometry that did hit that. And it was kind of cool to see it just kind of the viewer understand that, oh, we need to, allow the user to navigate more quickly and things like that. So, that stuff is there under the hood. Will the speed increase come with a quicker loading of the model as well? In our experience, it has, yes. We've had some pretty zippy loading times for some large models. Obviously, if you have a larger model, you're gonna wait a few seconds, or we've had a few really large models take maybe under a minute to load, but in like the same model under the previous version took much longer. So we are seeing improvements there. I noticed you used OmniClass as a dimension. Is it possible to use other classification systems instead? It just happened to be what was in the model that we were exporting. So OmniClass was implemented in the model. If the model is using a uniformat as a basis in its parameter values on objects, then you'd be able to use that as well. Good question about model clashes. If you had pictures of clashes tied to Revit and you had an exported database, sure. Yeah. One thing that we built, this was years ago before we had any of the more custom viewers that I've been showing here. We used Power BI as a way to communicate and parse and select model clashes, including the visual display of some of the clashes that were exported out of places like Navisworks. So yeah, it seems to be very feasible to use Power BI as a kind of a dashboard of clashing issues for sure. Just jumping back and forth here. Cool. All right. Well, I know that we are close to the hour. I hope this was an informative presentation and that you found value in learning more about what is coming with Tracer version 3. Feel free to reach out with questions if you have them. And you can look forward to a recording of this session available to be made available to everyone within, I would say, give me 24 hours. I'll say 24 hours is my base. I'm going to try to get it out before the end of business day to day, but sometimes, as you all know, in our world of design, construction, and technology, things can get sidetracked pretty quickly. So I'm going to make it my goal, end of business, but latest in the next 24 hours, you'll see a note from me with the recording attached. So you can reference it later. But thank you so much for joining. And I hope you're excited to give Tracer version 3 a try when it's available here in the coming month.